Hello, and welcome to the Muse Lab, your destination for all things spiritual, sensual, and pleasurable. Here I explore the nuances of our human experience, connect with practitioners to support your glow up, and share my lessons and blessings as perspective to move you closer to alignment and self-empowerment. I invite you to join me on this adventure of discovery, and hope what you receive inspires you to become the muse of your life's journey. So without further ado, let's explore. Hello, and welcome to the Muse Lab podcast. I am your host, Siobhan L., and welcome to season 4, y'all. I am actually elated that I'm here at this point because I remember when I was struggling to even just start this podcast, and so many people had been encouraging me to start, and I totally overthought the process. So when I finally did it, I was like, oh, this is it. It was a lot simpler than I had created in my head. But, self-fulfilling prophecies are a thing. So I'm glad I've made it to season 4 and enter season 4 on a refresh, on a pivot, and a rebrand. Well, for those who have been following the Muses Lab for the last 3 years, or even anyone who has followed Say It With Sex, which was the original name for this space, this may seem like a pivot. But for people who have been connected to me as a content creator for the last decade, this is not going to be a pivot. And I started out this journey wanting to uncover the nuances between spirituality, sexuality, and sensuality, but specifically between spirit and sex, and to show how there's an intersection there and that the two are not mutually exclusive of one another. That evolved into Say It With Sex, and then essentially it evolved into the Muses Lab. And during that journey, I went very full on into the exploration of pleasure. I talk about in one of the episodes, someone had asked me, I did a Q&A episode, and someone had asked me, how did I become the person who I am? As far as a sensualist, someone who really deep dives into sex and pleasure. And the pinch point for me was a person, I was about to say gentleman, but I think that's a lot nicer. A human being that I was involved with at the time really did me dirty and made me feel, he did not make me feel that way. He activated and exacerbated my own feelings of unworthiness with myself. He activated those notes within me. And the outcome was me seeking sovereignty in my sexuality, sovereignty in my sensuality, sovereignty in my expression of femininity, and all those things. And I just kind of had like a breakout moment where it didn't matter whether it was like a titty, not a full titty, but cleavage, décolletage, me and my lingerie, little twerk sessions, some ancestral movements. All of those things evolved into what people know, and who people know me as, the pleasure scholar. What I named myself, the pleasure scholar, the sensualist, Say It With Sex, the Muses Lab, the Muse Lab. So all the names and identities that people have given me have named me. That was the pinch point for that. So all that to say, I am and always have been a spiritualist. And the journey to uncover the intersections and even the integrations of sex and spirituality was always supposed to be spirit-led. And that pinch point that I talked about with the gentleman, or the man who, because he wasn't gentle at all, the man whom I was involved with at the time, veered me off my path. And the irony is that same person would say that I talk too much in riddles and astrology is so cultish and all those things. And can you not speak without having to reference everything to astrology or to spirituality? And it made me feel as if I didn't have any depth, or that I was too deep and that I didn't know how to have basic conversations. And it's not that I didn't know how to have basic conversations. My conversations are just always going to be deep because that's just me. And it activated spaces and within my self-esteem and my self-confidence, that made me want to retreat, or made me feel like I just wasn't good enough, or I was too weird, or I was too quirky, or too esoteric, too woo-woo. Almost as if he tried to pick me apart and say, you just doing that because everybody else is doing that. Like, that just can't be who you are. Until, we was about to bend it back and bust it open one day, and I was like, yeah, I got a crystal grid around the bed. That's when that motherfucker knew I was real. Anyway, that version of myself, me being spiritually led, took a back seat when my sacral energy, my sacral center, as per people in human design would say, when my sacral center was activated, was overcharged, the spiritual aspect took a back seat, and I went full on into pleasure and sexuality. And that's who a lot of people know me as, but I have always been and always will be a spiritualist. So the pivot, or really the redirect, that's happening with the Muses Lab, holistically, not just with this podcast, but with every aspect of my creative practice and the content that I create, is going to be spiritually led. And pleasure is not going to be removed from the brand, but it's going to be slightly deprioritized, but really shown as an outcome of being spiritually aligned with who you are. And pleasure has always been beyond penetration for the Muses Lab, but it's also going to focus on fulfillment. And I had already started to pivot because I was trying to think of, how do I bring the Muses Lab into or outside, I should say, the woo-woo sector, the woo-woo and the kink sector. Like, how do I make the Muses Lab crossover? How do I cross it over? And the bridge became fulfillment. And what prompted that is, when I was at my old corporate job, I was trying to understand or really tap into these feelings of fulfillment that I had been experiencing. Because at the time, I thought I had my dream job. Whew. That's an episode within itself. I'm not going to say dream jobs don't exist, but defining what a dream job is very subjective. The whole concept of a dream job is very subjective. So I thought I had my dream job, and at the time I was considering becoming like a fulfillment coach, because that's definitely, I was like, is fulfillment coaching a thing? Is that like a niche? Like, that's something that I wanted to explore, and I considered getting my life coaching certification, which is still not off the table. But I wanted to focus on fulfillment because at that time I felt fulfilled, because I was doing the thing that I desired to do, that I had wanted to do. I manifested that job. And I'm going to talk about one day, I touch on it a bit in the corporate baddie episode, but I'm going to talk about one day how you can manifest something and you can still fuck it up. With one decision, with one choice, you can alter the course that you are on quickly to bring you back into a delayed state, because it's always delayed, never denied. But delays happen, and delays can set you off course and take you on a very scenic route that doesn't always lean positively. I'm thinking about the Black Forest. I don't know, whoever's listening to this episode, if you watch Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power is on Amazon Prime, you'll know what the Black Forest is. So sometimes you can make decisions and choices, and you can manifest your dream, and one decision can bring you into the Black Forest. And sometimes people don't get out the Black Forest. Sometimes people get stuck in the Black Forest, and then you'll feel like manifestation is shit. But you just made a decision that kind of brought you into that space, and so on and so forth. So fulfillment is where I started to, is a path that I started on, and I dropped it. Not because I wanted to drop it, because I have ADHD. And that's what happens. New things come along, and it's shiny and new, and it feels good, and I get a dopamine hit, and the serotonin is high, and all that other stuff. And then something else comes and catches my interest, and that's another dopamine rush, right? Dopamine for persons who are neurodivergent, specifically people who are ADHD, aren't elongated. They come in moments. They come in parts. So trying to extend the dopamine rush is a challenge for people with ADHD, whether you're medicated or not, whether you're diagnosed or undiagnosed. That's really what it is. So the dopamine rush of uncovering, like, wow, I can transition pleasure into fulfillment hit me, but it became deprioritized. And I'm now circling back. That was 3 years ago. So I'm now circling back to the space, the path that I uncovered for myself 3 years ago, and walking slowly down that path to fulfillment. So pleasure is being viewed now in the Muses Lab ecosystem as an outcome. I thought pleasure was the framework and the lens through which we view the world, but really it's through spirit. Everything, the path, is through spirit. And when you are aligned with spirit, whether you say spirit, God, source, the universe, Allah, Oludumare, however you identify the great power that guards this earth, the path to which you seek fulfillment is through spirit. And when you are aligned with your spirit team, spirit squad, ancestors, Haricha, Loa, and whatever the deities, archangels, ascended masters, whatever deities that you concern yourself with, that you work with, that you pray to, that you align to, the path is through that way. It's through spirit. So you receive fulfillment when you are in spiritual alignment. So spirit is the gateway, pleasure is the outcome. And that is the path moving forward with the Muses Lab. We're going to connect everything to spirit and allow it to branch out and expand. Because you can be kinky and still be spiritual, because there is spirituality in kink. There is spirituality in sex and in actual sex. Your orgasm is spiritual. Your movement is spiritual. Twerking is ancestral. Spirit is in everything. Spirit is intertwined in everything. Pleasure is not in everything. You can find things to be pleasurable, but pleasure is not always in everything. But spirit is everywhere. It is intertwined. It is within the fabric of our existence on this earth. So that's where we at. So this space, I will be speaking more spiritually. And the irony is that when I first started the podcast, when it was Say It Was Sex, I didn't hit an actual sex episode until episode 5. So I was 5 episodes in by the time I started talking about actual sex. And that should have been a clue for me right there, that that was the path that I'm supposed to be on. So again, it's not that pleasure and sexuality and all those things that people know me for are being removed. They're just being reacclimated and resituated with the filter and the overcoat of spirituality. And my goal is to connect with practitioners, particularly practitioners who have been very influential, whether they know it or not, on my path, and have directly and indirectly encouraged and influenced me. And I've learned from them. I've received from them. So I want to be able to highlight these practitioners on the podcast and really go in depth with their practice and things that they would like to share with the community at large. So it is my goal to connect with those folks, as well as talk about my journey, like how I even got here. Like I talk about how I became this pleasure priestess, as many people have named me, and I still receive that. But I haven't talked much about how I became a spiritualist, how I embraced being a spiritualist, how I accepted, how I touched and agreed with me as a spiritualist. I haven't talked about that in length or in depth I've mentioned it and I've dropped little pieces here and there, but my path to who I've become as a spiritualist is very nuanced. It's very interesting. So definitely sharing that and sharing how I'm recommitting myself to spirit, because I definitely lost my way for a while. I've definitely walked away from certain practices, and if anyone who's been following me long enough, I know there's a lot of practitioners who will not agree, but I always say when you don't choose Ifa, Ifa chooses you. Ifa chooses you. And it doesn't matter how much you want to walk away and throw it away and be like, fuck this shit, I'm out. Ifa chooses you. Once you open that door, unless they cut you off, it's hard for you to do it yourself, because you have a path, you have a destiny when you open your heart to Ifa. So even that in itself is a story. And the lessons that I have learned on this spiritual journey, connecting with people who have wronged me, people who have tried to contain me, my own naivete, my own loyalty to certain people, to certain things, lack of education, becoming self-taught, seeking mentorship and not receiving it, feeling like mentorship is removed from me. So there's a lot in the spiritual narrative of who I am, of who Siobhan L is. There's a lot to cover, and there's a lot of lessons that I've learned. So my lived experience is data for me to share with the community, so that someone who resonates with me or with this journey or with whatever I'm speaking about can receive the tools and the insights and the guidance that they need. So yeah, it's gearing up to be a very hearty season, and I'm excited. I'm excited for returning to myself as a spiritualist and really integrating all that I have learned being the pleasure priestess and evolving into the priestess of perspective, which includes both the spiritual, the sensual, and the sexual self, the holy trinity, as I call it, the holy, like pro-ho, HEAUXLY, the holy trinity, and really sharing that framework and all these frameworks. I know my people be like, can you put down a framework, please? Does everything have to be a framework? Well, came down here as Virgo Venus, so Sag rising in a Virgo Venus with ADHD. I don't understand how you don't think frameworks don't make sense to me. I'm a framework the hell out of some shit. That's how my brain operates in structure. But I will do my best to not compartmentalize everything and allow things to flow, but also give some language to a lot of things that many of you may be experiencing. And that's my contribution, not to just this podcast, but to my content overall as well. So again, I'm excited, and I just want to pop in and introduce season 4 to you all and get the energy of this podcast back on track, because it's been a while since our last episode. Life has evolved and transformed immensely since that last episode. I have moved. Yeah, I moved. We just gonna keep that there. I moved. And yeah, so many things have occurred. Before I get into a whole ramble scramble, stay tuned to the Muses Lab podcast and keep it locked. Make sure you subscribe and set your notifications. Make sure you follow me on these social platforms at the Muses Lab on Instagram, TikTok, Threads. Those are the places I'm at the most. I pop in and out on the Letter app, but I'm Siobhan L on the Letter app. But if you want to follow the Muses Lab, I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. And if I could rank on myself, some of these episodes will be video on my actual YouTube channel. that has been sitting dormant for a while. So yeah, excited. I'm excited for those things to happen. And as always, thank you for tuning in, and until next time. Thank you for tapping into the Muses Lab. I hope you enjoyed this week's adventure. Be sure to like this episode, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and share the wealth with others. Sign up for my newsletter and join the TML community at www.themuseslab.com. Receive weekly musings, early access, and exclusive drops, as well as discounts on products and services. Thank you once again for tapping in, and until next time.